Kevin Hart walked on stage, flashing that signature grin, ready to do what he does best, make people laugh until they can't breathe. But what happened next? No one saw it coming. One minute, the crowd was doubled over in laughter. The next, there were actual tears. And no, not just from laughing too hard. Was it a joke gone too far? A surprise guest? A moment so real it hit everyone straight in the heart? Let's just say this wasn't your typical comedy show. Hart did something that left fans talking long after the lights went down, something that had them feeling everything: joy, nostalgia, and maybe even a lump in their throat. Whatever you're imagining, trust me, it was even better. And you don't want to miss this. So stick around, because once you see what went down on that stage, you'll understand why nobody left that show the same way they came in. Let's start with one of the biggest moments of the night: the parenting fail story. Kevin Hart strutted across the stage, microphone in hand, his signature grin already teasing the crowd. He let the laughter from his last joke settle before leaning forward, lowering his voice just a bit and saying, "Let me tell y'all about the time I accidentally traumatized my kids." Boom. Right there, the audience knew they were about to witness something legendary. Kevin has a gift for storytelling. He doesn't just tell a joke. He pulls you in, makes you feel like you were right there in the room when it happened. And when he said the word traumatized, you could already hear the anticipation bubbling in the crowd. Parents exchanged knowing looks. Young adults braced themselves for some absurd childhood memory to resurface, and everyone leaned in, ready for the chaos to unfold. Kevin wasted no time diving into the story. He painted the picture. It was a typical morning. He was doing his best to be a responsible dad, which, in his words, is already a challenge. He woke the kids up, which he described as being harder than his most intense workouts. Made breakfast. By made, he meant pouring cereal, and got them dressed for school. Everything seemed to be going well. Except, there was one tiny problem. Kevin's son walked into class wearing two completely different shoes. And not just slightly mismatched, one sneaker, one dress shoe. The crowd lost it. Laughter exploded through the venue. People were slapping their knees, leaning on their friends, shaking their heads because, yep, this was classic Kevin. But Kevin wasn't done. He reenacted his son walking into the classroom, the confused look on the teacher's face, the absolute betrayal on his kid's face when he realized what had happened. He mimicked the exact moment his son looked down, saw his feet, and froze in horror. And then, Kevin flipped the mood. The energy in the room shifted as he transitioned from exaggerated animated storytelling to something more real. He sighed, shook his head, and said, "You ever feel like you're trying so hard as a parent, but somehow you still mess it up?" The laughter turned into knowing chuckles. Parents in the audience started nodding. The ones who had sent their kids to school with inside-out shirts, forgotten lunchboxes, or mismatched socks. They felt this one in their souls. Kevin continued. And the worst part? Your kid looks at you like, "Why do I even trust you?" Boom. Another gut punch. The type of joke that was hilarious, but at the same time, painfully accurate. Suddenly, the laughter had a different weight to it. It wasn't just funny anymore, it was relatable. It was real. Every parent in the crowd saw a version of themselves in that moment. Every person who had ever been a kid and had one of those, "Why are my parents like this?" moments felt deeply understood. And that's why Kevin Hart is who he is. Midway through the show, Kevin did what he does best: connect with the audience. And if you've ever seen Kevin Hart perform live, you know this is where the magic happens. See, Kevin isn't just a comedian who delivers punchlines and moves on. He interacts. He reacts. He makes the crowd part of the show. And this time, it was different. As he scanned the sea of faces, his eyes landed on something that made him stop mid-sentence. A sign. A simple, handwritten sign held up in the crowd. It read, "My mom loved you. This show is for her." The atmosphere in the arena shifted instantly. The usual hum of laughter and murmurs fell into complete silence. Kevin paused, blinked, and pointed toward the person holding the sign. A guy in his late 20s, sitting near the front, looking equal parts excited and emotional. Kevin, microphone in hand, took a step forward and asked, "What's your name, man?" There was a brief moment where it seemed like the guy, overwhelmed by the attention, might not even be able to answer. He swallowed hard, took a deep breath, and finally said, "Jordan." Jordan's voice was a little shaky, and for a second, you could tell he was holding back emotions. Kevin, sensing the weight of the moment, lowered his voice, making the massive venue feel suddenly intimate. Jordan explained his mom was a huge Kevin Hart fan, the kind of fan who knew all his jokes by heart, watched all his specials, and always said they'd see him live together one day. But that day never came, because earlier that year Jordan's mom had passed away, and now, here he was. At the show they were supposed to attend together. Cue the gut punch. There was no awkwardness, no rush to move past the moment. Kevin didn't do what some comedians might, throw out a quick joke and move on. No, he leaned into it. He looked Jordan dead in the eye and with absolute sincerity said, "Man, your mom is here. You know that, right?" Jordan nodded, trying to hold himself together. Kevin continued, "She's got the best seat in the house. If she was a fan of mine, trust me, she's watching right now. Front row in heaven." The entire audience felt it. The weight, the love, the loss, the connection. And just when the moment was on the verge of becoming too heavy, Kevin did what he does best. He lightened it just right. With a small smirk, he added, "And if your mom was a real fan of mine, I guarantee you, she's up there roasting me right now." The crowd exploded. People were laughing, but through tears. It was one of those rare moments where comedy and raw emotion met in perfect balance. Even Kevin looked a little emotional for a second, but then he threw his arms up, gave a dramatic look to the sky, and said, "All right, lady, I hear you. Stop roasting me in front of your son." That did it. The audience lost it. Some were clutching their stomachs laughing. Others were wiping their eyes, touched by the sincerity of the moment. Jordan? He was smiling, really smiling, for what was probably the first time in a long time when thinking about his mom. And that's why Kevin Hart is more than just a comedian, because he doesn't just tell jokes, he makes people feel something. Kevin Hart is known for one thing above all else, keeping things light. He's the guy who can turn any situation into a joke, who brings energy and laughter no matter where he goes. But on this tour, he went there. See, when you're used to a comedian who never lets things get too serious, it hits differently when they do. Kevin didn't just throw out punchlines and move on. He opened up. Standing center stage, he took a deep breath, glanced around the crowd, and lowered his voice. The energy in the room shifted. It wasn't just a performance anymore, it was a conversation. He started talking about the pressure of being a public figure, the expectation to always be on, to always be the funny guy, no matter what's going on behind the scenes. And then, he dropped this line. You ever feel like people only want the best parts of you? Like they love you when you're funny, when you're successful, when you're winning. But the second you struggle, the second you're not perfect, they don't know what to do with you? The audience? Silent. Not the awkward kind of silence, the deep, hanging silence where you know everyone in that room is feeling it. You could hear a pin drop. Kevin let that moment breathe. He scanned the crowd, making eye contact with people, letting the weight of his words settle in. And then he hit them with the real talk. Man, I spent years pretending I was fine when I wasn't. You know how exhausting that is? You know what's crazy? The moment I stopped pretending, the moment I let myself just be, was the moment I felt free. Boom. Right there. The moment that broke people. It was raw. It was honest. And for a lot of people sitting in that audience, it was too real. You could see it. People nodding, some looking down, others wiping away tears. It was one of those rare moments in a comedy show where the audience wasn't just listening to jokes, they were seeing themselves in the story. Because let's be real, who hasn't felt that way? Who hasn't put on a face, acted like they were okay when they weren't, afraid that if they showed their struggles, people wouldn't know how to handle it? And that's why this moment wasn't just another joke. It was Kevin Hart standing on stage, stripped of the humor, the hype, the performance, and just being a human talking to other humans. Just when everyone thought the night had hit its peak, when they had laughed, cried, and everything in between, Kevin pulled one last trick out of his sleeve. Bam! Special guest time. And not just any special guest. Out of nowhere, Kevin turned to the side of the stage, grinned, and said, "Y'all ain't ready for this." The crowd barely had time to react before Dave Chappelle walked out. If you think the audience went wild, multiply that reaction by 10. People jumped to their feet, screaming, clapping, losing their minds like they just won the lottery. Because let's be real, this wasn't just any guest appearance. This was two of the greatest comedians of all time standing on the same stage, about to do what they do best. And they wasted no time. For the next 10 minutes, Kevin and Dave did what every fan in that room had secretly hoped for. They roasted the hell out of each other. Chappelle: Kevin, you short, but your career taller than all of us. Kevin: that's crazy, because last time I checked, my bank account taller than both of us. The crowd: absolutely losing it. This wasn't scripted, this wasn't planned. It was two legends having the time of their lives, making each other, and everyone watching, laugh uncontrollably. But then something cool happened. They switched gears. In between all the jokes, they got real for a second. They talked about how much comedy meant to them, how the ability to make people laugh is something they'll never take for granted. Chappelle looked out at the crowd and said, "You know, we get up here and we make jokes, we make y'all laugh. But man, the fact that y'all show up, that you support what we do, that's what makes this special. That's what keeps this alive." Kevin nodded. You could see it on his face. This wasn't just another show. This was a moment. And just like that, the night ended on a high, a perfect mix of humor, heart, and history being made on stage. Because that's what makes Kevin Hart's shows different. It's never just about the laughs. It's about the moments you never forget. So, what was your favorite moment of the night? The parenting fail, the emotional audience interaction, or Kevin and Dave roasting each other like it was a comedy battle for the ages? Drop your thoughts in the comments and join the conversation. And hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and share it with your friends. Because let's be honest, everyone could use a good laugh. Until next time, stay tuned for more epic moments, more comedy gold, and more reasons to keep laughing.